For what seemed to be eternity, all I knew was pain. I could feel my skin dissolve and flow away, my flesh boil, my bones crack and shatter. I felt my extremities torn away, and somehow, insanely, I felt even my skull and then my brain dissolve. And yet, I did not die. My consciousness did not fade. My thoughts did not stop, no matter how much I wanted them to, no matter how much I begged and pleaded silently for the pain to end. Instead, I had to be there for that terrible torture, every excruciating last moment of it. It is impossible to try to describe how terrible this really was, so I won't. Instead, I will speak of what came after. After eternity ended, after the nightmare that never stopped faded away, I was left with nothing but my own thoughts in a blank, endless void. I just existed there for another indeterminate amount of time. It was peaceful. Perhaps I had died, and this was what came next. And honestly, if it was, I would have been okay with that. It gave me a moment to reflect, to look back on all my decisions, where there was nothing but me and my own thoughts. I thought of the way that I had treated the group and how they had ended up turning against me in the end. I thought of how the way I had consumed that flesh had changed me, and how it had led me to becoming more and more separated from my fellow humans around me, both physically and mentally. And finally, I thought of Hagar, and the terror and revulsion in her bruised and battered eyes during our final moments together, before I was consumed by that creature. And after all of that, there was only one conclusion that I could come to about myself, and the choices that I had made that had led me to this moment, here, in the literal belly of the beast. Next time, if I got a next time, I would make sure to surround myself with people that actually listened to what I said, so that this sort of thing would never happen again. Suddenly, I heard something. I didn't have any ears, or even a brain to process that I had heard something, but I did. It sounded like a person's voice, but so distant I couldn't make out what they were saying. Despite that, I did hear them, some way, somehow. And as I listened, another voice emerged, also at a far distance, but distinct. Still, I could not make out what they were saying, and so I found myself somehow drawing closer to them, despite the fact that I had no physical body to speak of. It was as though I was floating in a ceaseless expanse, moving myself with sheer force of will towards the only other thing in this endless place. And yes, their voices were growing clearer, but as I approached, I realized something. They were not speaking. They were screaming. Suddenly, another voice joined them, and then another, and another. These were screaming too, although now there was the occasional word mixed in. They were saying, "Please!" and "Kill me!" and "Make it stop!" More and more voices joined them, piling on and on until it was an endless sea of screaming and begging and pleading. Thousands, no, millions, maybe billions of them, all crying out into the empty black abyss. "Help us!" they cried. "Save us from this torment!" they said. "Who am I?" they questioned. But I could do nothing. I was just another one of the voices. I floated above them, but even as I did, a wave of this ocean of agony reached up and smashed into me, dragging me down into the crimson red depths of this damned place. And suddenly, I understood why they were screaming. The moment I made contact with the wave, I was a part of them, and they were a part of me. I could see their memories, their thoughts and feelings, their emotions and dreams and nightmares and everything that made them them. I was a banker, a businessman, a stay at home mom, a child, a deep sea diver, a well digger. I was a person from a small village in Africa where every day I had to go get water 10 miles away. I was a person on an expedition to the Arctic to look at polar bears. I was a CEO of a powerful company about to perform a merger. I was a janitor at a middle school that had to clean up vomit. I was furious that my boyfriend had broken up with me. I was terrified of the robber that had broken into my house. I was bored at another long day at work, sorting papers and doing little else. Every one of these things and more flashed through me, and I was all of them, and none of them. It was madness. There was no me. I tried to keep up with it, but there was no I. I was nothing but another voice in the squirming masses. I cried out, whether on purpose or not, trying to separate my own self from all the others, but that too was lost in all the endless noise. And then the images began. Just like all the emotions, the memories that flashed through my mind I could see now too, but through strange, unfamiliar eyes. I saw through eyes that were not my own, and yet were. I looked down at a child that was mine, but not mine, as they rode a bike for the first time. I felt pride swell in my chest, even though it was not my pride to feel. Then I was a high diver, peering over the edge of the board, mentally trying to prepare myself for the jump, the fall, the contact with the water. I felt all the trepidation and excitement that came with preparing to do that, even though I had never actually jumped from such a thing. Hadn't I? I was in an open air market, haggling for a melon that I have never seen before. I could feel the annoyance with the shopkeeper, the desire to make a good deal, even the thrill of the hunt for food, as divorced from its original caveman ancestry that it was. I was no longer whoever I had been before. I could not even remember who that person was. They were gone. I was one with the group, no more separate from the whole than a leaf is from a tree. It was the only existence I knew, that I had ever known, that I would ever know. But still, I felt something nagging at the back of my mind. There was this little voice crying out that I was an individual, with my own desires and drives, separate from all the rest. That I was powerful and important. That I was better than this. That was ridiculous, though. I had always been this way. It had always been nothing but a hodgepodge of disconnected memories, each one separate from the last. Here, now I was a man riding a bike, loving the thrill of going down the hill faster than what was strictly necessary. Now I was a woman, peering out over the ocean from the edge of a cliff, feeling contentment for the beauty of the world. Now I was a soldier, being chased through the trenches of war, fear in my heart from the thing that was chasing me. Now I was a performer, nervous about going on... Wait, what was that last one? The one where I was a soldier. It almost felt familiar. It was hard, so very hard, to pull back and focus on a previous thought, but I managed to do it, undoubtedly because that was now my second time experiencing that memory that was not my own. And yes, remembering it now, really looking at it, I had seen this before. But where? Was it my own memory? But wait, didn't I just say it wasn't my own? It was all so confusing. I couldn't concentrate, could barely keep my thoughts together. I was a man standing at the edge of a skyscraper, threatening to jump because I couldn't take it anymore. I was an old woman in a beautiful garden, looking down at a flowering plant and feeling satisfaction at a job well done. I was now a young woman at the bottom of a staircase, looking up at a man in a dark jacket with a pale face like death, staring down at me as my whole body filled with dread. Wait, there was no denying it. I had seen that memory before. I could recognize it clearly in my mind, as clearly as though I was looking at it on a piece of paper. But where? And how? How could I have seen it before becoming a part of the masses? Wasn't I always a part of the masses? Suddenly, another memory, this one different from the others. A room made of meat, a man falling into a pit, a knife carving the flesh from the floor. I grabbed that memory and I held on to it. I don't know why, but it felt different from the others. Why? What was special about it? And then it hit me. That memory was mine. It was my memory. I had made it. I had been there. I wasn't just an observer, an onlooker. I had made those choices. I was that person. I was Athaliah. It all slammed back into me in an instant. I was Athaliah. I was the leader of the flock, the one who made the decisions. I was the chooser of my own fate. I made my own decisions, and they affected other people, not the other way around. I had seen these memories before because they had come to me in visions. I was me. But even as I came to this realization, even as I pulled away, I could feel myself slipping again, falling back into that horrible soup. Their memories, their thoughts and feelings were pulling on the edge of my consciousness like a person plucking at the threads of a blanket. It was only a matter of time before I was pulled back into them and was lost once more. And next time, I wasn't so sure I would be able to separate myself from them again. I already felt so weak, so tired from pulling myself together the first time. I needed to do something now. So, I mustered up all my willpower together, and I pulled. I strained and heaved and fought to pull myself up from them, even though there was no me, and there was no them. Not really. We had no bodies. We didn't even have brains. We were just thoughts and personalities, but still they held on to me with fingers and hands that didn't really exist because they didn't want me to leave. Because if I left, they would be a little bit more alone, and that thought terrified them. But it was more than that. If I left, if I could separate myself, then that meant that they could have too. They could have the whole time, and they didn't. Because they were weak. Well, maybe they were weak, but I wasn't. I was strong. I was the leader. I was the one in charge. When the time of need came, the flock turned to me, and I embraced them with open arms and led them to a better place. So I pulled and retched, and slowly, ever so slowly at first, I separated myself. The ocean of red agony stretched up with me, trying to hold on, but I was too strong, too powerful, and I got further and further away, stretching them ever thinner. And then, quite suddenly, something broke. Like a thread being pulled too taut, a connection snapped, and I was a little less them and a little more me. After the first break, another one followed. And then another, and then another. It was a snowball effect, with each broken connection making it easier to pull away, and thus letting me put more strain on what was left, making it ever easier to break free. I could feel them ripping away, with each one another memory disappearing in a flash, leaving me feeling a little more empty, a little less connected, but also, conversely, a little more myself. Finally, with one last push, I pulled myself out completely, and then I was alone once more, with only my own thoughts and feelings and rationale. It was strange. I was happy to be separated, to be myself once more and no longer have to wonder what was me and what wasn't. That had been agony, never knowing what I was going to remember, to feel next. But it was also lonely, in a way. Going from so many voices to just myself, It was like I had taken myself out of a crowded room, bustling with life and business, to an empty warehouse. It was almost as though my thoughts were echoing in my own head from all the free space now. But still, I would rather have that than not have me. The rest of them could suffer on their own. I had my own plans. The red ocean churned beneath me, so I looked up instead, and what I saw was astounding. There were holes, for lack of a better term, leading up and away to something unknown. What were they there for? A thought. Did I come from one of those holes? After the beast ate me, had I been sent down here? An upsetting thought, thinking about the fact that I had been consumed, but here I was. More importantly, what would happen if I tried to go back up? I looked down to the endless sea of pain, constantly screaming and crying, begging for release. Anything was better than here. I sent myself up one of the holes. I suppose in a way it was just my consciousness, and everything I was seeing was just putting it in a way I could understand. But that was all conjecture, and not very important to the task at hand. I flew, but not really flew, down its raw, wet path. I traveled for what seemed to be ages, the path constantly getting smaller and smaller, until finally I was struck by a blinding light. It took me a moment to adjust, and then an even longer moment to understand what was going on. My vision was fractured, like I was peering out from dozens of eyes in all directions. It was already giving me a headache, which was strange because I didn't have a head anymore. Or a brain. But slowly, I managed to focus in on what seemed to be important. I was in a park, with Asian looking architecture in the distance, which would mean I had to have traveled hundreds, no, thousands of miles from where I had been last. I was huge, at least 20 feet tall, and I was looking at a woman and child. They were trying to hide from me, curled up in a corner and looking up at me with a terrified expression. Why were they looking at me like that? I slowly moved my concentration from the parts of my vision looking at them to the other views I had. They were strange, to say the least. An arm there, a leg there, a mouth over here. I could even see a strange long tube running out of the back of me? None of it made any sense. Then, it suddenly clicked. I had been consumed by one of those beasts and sent down to that place. I had escaped it and fled back up. Where did the tubes go back up to? The beasts. I was a beast. It wasn't like I was looking through a dozen eyes. I was looking through a dozen eyes. I would have put my hands on my head if I had any idea how to move these arms. Or if I had a head. I managed to refocus back down on the woman and child, who were now slowly moving away from me, a mixture of fear and confusion etched into their faces. I suppose I can't blame them. Clearly, I had interrupted some sort of chase, seemingly right as they were about to get caught. Though that did beg the question. If I was now the one controlling this strange, unnatural body, who had been controlling it before? Had anyone? Or had it simply been acting on base instinct? It was all so confusing, and the more I thought about it, the harder of a time I had holding on to my control. It was taking nearly everything I had to simply keep this terrible beast just standing up, and with the amount of mental turmoil I was in, my command of my new limbs was rapidly fading. It was as though I had just finished a marathon that I was not prepared for, and my limbs were simply giving out on me. Even through my fading vision, I watched the woman and child make it around my gargantuan body and run away as fast as they could, making as much distance as possible. I suppose that was fine. I didn't really care what happened to them. I had my own issues to figure out. With that, I felt the last of my control slip away, and I fell down, 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 back to the in between place, above the ocean of agony, but below the strange flesh tubes. I made sure to stay far above the ocean, although of course there was no up here. But still, I looked up at the flesh tubes, and I thought about how one of them had taken me to a beast, seemingly on the other side of the world. That was interesting. I don't think it would be a stretch to assume that the other flesh tubes would lead me to other beasts, but where they would be, I had no clue. The holes stretched for seemingly forever in every direction. I didn't even know what I was looking for, anyway. It's not like I could return to my body, my true body. I was certain that was long gone. I wish I could, though. I missed it, even with all of its strange aberrations. But what good would becoming the beast do me? That didn't allow me to be in control, to be adored by a flock, to have people to hang on to my every word. I might have physical power in it, sure, if I could figure out how to control it, but that wasn't what I was after. In one of those bodies, no matter what it looked like, I would never be able to wear my red dress. Not really. I sighed, or I would have, if I could. I wish I had someone to talk to about this, someone to offer advice. I could really use that right now. I glanced down at the ocean beneath me as it screamed. The only advice I would get from that would be to lose myself entirely, and I would not do that. Not now, not ever. I wish. I wish I had Mother. But there was no way to get to her, or even know where she was. So I suppose that was a pointless wish. Still, I wanted to talk to her. She would know what to do. I felt a slight tug on me, causing me to stir from my thoughts. Was the ocean trying to grab me again? No, it was still far below, writhing in its endless agony. Then what was that? I felt it again, and it almost felt calm, like it was trying to guide me somewhere. I wasn't sure what was going on, but it wasn't like I had anything to lose, so I allowed it to pull me away. It brought me to a specific hole, and it seemed to stop there, leaving me suspended underneath it. It seemed to be my choice to make. Could it be that some way, somehow, this place, whatever it is, had responded to my desire? Would this take me to Mother? I suppose there's only one way to find out. I accepted and ascended back up, allowing the meat to take me where it pleased. And hopefully, that would be to Mother. Once again, I went up, faster and faster, ignoring how claustrophobic it became, flying up its red, raw flesh. I wanted to know, to see her, to be able to ask her all these burning questions I had. And I knew, in my heart, that she could fix me, put me back in my body, help me get that red dress. She was strong like that. Strong like me. I emerged, light burning my eyes, but thankfully with only a single set this time, making it much easier to focus. I was in a desert, with sand all around me and a small, dull-looking town right nearby. Directly underneath me was a patch of green grass, and nearby, a tree, but that wasn't what I found important. What was important was the people. There was a dark-skinned woman who I gave little thought to. She felt vaguely familiar, but she paled in comparison to the other two individuals. One of them sent fear coursing through me, and I might have backed up if I was able. It was the man. The pale man with the long cloak. The man who looked like death, whose eyes gleamed like the stars. He was here. He wasn't a hallucination or a vision or anything like that. It was him in the flesh. Even though I towered over him, I felt the desire, the need to flee from his presence. He would be the end of me. I just knew it. But I didn't, for one reason. and one reason only. Mother was the third person, looking up at me and smiling her strange smile with those rows of perfectly symmetrical teeth. She was here too, physical, real. It was evident from the way the setting sun glimmered off her perfect golden hair and the way she moved in her unusual, fluid way. It was really her. And I was so excited to finally meet her.